I picked up a new-to-me portable PA speaker that was too good of a deal to pass up. It's a JBL EON One Compact, and it's got a nice feature set. It's battery-powered and offers an integrated digital mixer with various effects, ducking, and of course, Bluetooth connectivity. Its wired connection options are solid too, with a pair of USB ports for charging devices, line in and out jacks, and 2 mic preamps. But look closer and this specific speaker hasn't had the easiest life. The screws securing the electronics to the case all show signs of rust, which is an ominous sign I'll need to look into a bit further. The bigger problem is the power button, or lack thereof, really. This isn't necessarily a sign of abuse though, as it's a known issue with this model that there just isn't enough info out there about. So fixing it is what I hope to better illustrate here. I started by removing the battery, which is behind an access panel on the back. It's a lithium-ion pack, as one might expect, and it offers 6100 mAh of capacity, which JBL says will last for up to 12 hours. From there, I used a Torx T9 screwdriver to remove the screws around the perimeter of the amplifier plate. I'll deal with cleaning these up later on. With all of them removed, I was able to pull the module away from the speaker, being mindful of the wiring still connected to it. There are 2 harnesses to disconnect, one down by the power supply module and another towards the top. There's a third single wire as well, which is the Bluetooth antenna. But in my speaker, it was already disconnected, which makes me a bit worried that someone's been in here before. This bit of hot glue next to where the power button used to be suggests that's indeed the case. The power button itself was sitting at the bottom of the electronics pocket, and it's supposed to fit between the small tactile switch on the PCB and the back panel. But fatigue causes it to break from its mounting screw, which can also lead to the switch bending backwards or snapping off the PCB entirely. The good news is that JBL is aware of the problem and has a way to fix it. I called up their parts department and was sent for free a new power button along with a replacement switch and a small metal bracket. Installing them, though, requires some additional disassembly. I removed the remnants of the power button to get it out of the way, then the screws holding the main PCB to the control panel needed to come out. They're a mix of Torx and Phillips screws for some reason. I also had to take out the screws securing the combo XLRs, as well as the nuts on the 1/4-inch jacks, which a 15mm socket made quick work of. Then I could lift the PCB and swing it out of the way. The power amplifier chip is on the back side of the board, and it's a TPA 3251 from Texas Instruments. As with a lot of Class D amps, this one is surprisingly powerful for its size, offering 140 watts per channel into 4 ohms at 1% distortion. It uses the control panel as its heatsink with the help of a solid metal block and a copious amount of thermal paste. Don't worry, this stuff isn't conductive. With the PCB out of the way, I could install the new power button, then put everything back together. This is a pretty well-designed and compact board for what it does, considering it handles all of the audio mixing too. I was disappointed to see no name capacitors on it, since that means I'm likely going to have to get back in here in a decade or so and replace them when they fail. Allow me a quick nerdy diversion. Well, nerdier than this video already is. Other than the amplifier, there's 2 main other chips that make this speaker work. The first is a so-called codec chip from Cirrus Logic, a CS42526. It has 2 analog to digital converters built in, which the XLR inputs are tied into. It also functions as a mixer and signal processor, basically the thing that coordinates the audio path. The 2 additional line inputs feed a separate ADC chip, a quad-channel Texas Instruments part that passes the digital signal to the codec chip through I2S. It's quad channel, as one of those line inputs is stereo, which you may think is dumb since the speaker itself is mono. But you can pair a second speaker through Bluetooth and turn them into a stereo pair, hence stereo input. The audio from the codec chip goes directly to the amplifier as 2 balanced analog signals, already split out and crossed over for the woofer and tweeter. The other main chip is what controls everything, an STM32F030 series-based SoC. It features an ARM Cortex CPU core running at 48 MHz, 32 kilobytes of RAM, and 256 kilobytes of flash. That's not much, but since all it needs to do is deal with user input from the control panel and illuminate some LEDs, those specifications are plenty. Okay, diversion over. The board is reinstalled, but notice that I didn't screw the power button in yet. That's because JBL, as a way to prevent the problem from happening again, designed a metal support bracket. It not only keeps you from pressing the button too far in, but also prevents the tact switch from bending. I bet they're wishing they had put this in from the start, but at least they owned up to the problem and fixed it. If you just needed to replace the power button, all you have to do now is plug the wiring harnesses back in and don't forget the Bluetooth antenna cable. Then reinstall the screws and you're all set. But it's those screws I wanted to deal with. At best, the rust was ugly, and at worst, it would get, well, worse. A couple of them were easy to replace outright, like the ones for the AC power socket. I had some new M3x10 screws on hand, and they looked much better. Those Torx screws that hold the control panel on are another matter. They're what are known as thread-forming screws, as they'll, well, form their own threads when driven into materials like the plastic of the speaker cabinet. Problem is, I couldn't find identical replacements anywhere, and I didn't like the idea of shiny silver screws since they'd look off. So I decided to try removing the rust first and see if that would work well enough. There's a few different options, but the easiest and cheapest DIY rust remover is apple cider vinegar. It takes a while to work, but as I waited, I took a closer look at the speaker's electronics and found no signs of water damage, so I was thankful that some rusty screws were really just the worst of it. 24 hours later, and the screws had formed bubbles around them, so maybe the vinegar had done something after all. After rinsing them off in isopropyl alcohol, it looked like the rust was still there, but it just wiped off with a paper towel. I think what happened is that the vinegar broke down the black oxide coating on the screws, so they were down to bare metal. That would mean they'd potentially rust again, so I put them in a bag and let them soak in some WD-40. People tend to misuse this stuff as a lubricant when it's not, but as a way to protect from rust, it works pretty well. With those screws looking better, I got the speaker reassembled. The real reason why the power button breaks isn't entirely because of a poor mechanical design. Rather, this speaker takes a long time to boot up without indication that it's doing so. This leads people to press the power button harder, thinking it isn't working. JBL released a firmware update to help with this, which you can install through the ProConnect app over Bluetooth. But even after a factory reset of my speaker, it always stayed stuck on a status of syncing when I tried to add it. Which reminds me of one of the most brilliant commercials of our time.
Mayday, mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
I'll deal with the app later, but it's spelled out here in the setup guide. With the update installed, the Bluetooth LED will illuminate red shortly after pressing the power button as an indication that the speaker is indeed booting up. I thought I was done working on this thing just to discover another patch of rust I'd previously missed. This time it's on one side of the grill, and it's only going to get worse if I don't do something about it. My initial thought was to have it professionally sandblasted and powder coated, but that would have cost over $100 US. A new grill was $85 with shipping, so that's the way I went. It's pretty easy to replace. Just flip the speaker over and peel the rubber feet off the bottom to expose the Phillips head screws. Be careful when removing the bottom cover as it's still attached by a wiring harness. This is for the front status LED. I had to peel some of the foam tape off the connector to pull it apart, then the front grille just lifted away. The new one came without the JBL badge. This is a clever piece as it's spring-loaded, so you can rotate it if you use the speaker horizontally. I unscrewed the badge from the old grill and was glad I hadn't tried to go with the sandblasting approach. It has a synthetic fabric cloth on the back, which I would have made an absolute mess of trying to remove and reinstall. But after I got the badge swapped over to the new grill, I got curious. Okay, time for another diversion. The EON One Compact has an 8-inch woofer and 1-inch tweeter, and I wanted to know more. There's some fiber damping material inside the enclosure to help reduce resonance, but is there anything special about the drivers themselves? I broke out the screwdriver again to find out. The woofer had some decent weight to it and only one label, a part number that reads T911-6000-11370. I felt like I've seen a part number similar to that before, but couldn't quite place it. I wanted to find a part number for the tweeter, but its mounting bracket was covering the sticker, and removing it would involve a lot more disassembly. But I found a photo of it, and it has a similar part number, T911-6000-11360. But still, no brand name showing who made it. Truth be told, I had originally wanted to buy the EON's competitor, the Electro-Voice Everse 8. But for reasons I'll get to in a bit, I picked up the EON instead. But now I was wondering, what drivers are used in the Everse? It also has an 8-inch woofer and 1-inch tweeter. Were those made by Electro-Voice themselves? I didn't want to buy a unit to find out, but it turns out there's exactly one teardown of that speaker on the internet, also here on YouTube. I've put a link to it in the description. It told me what I wanted to know, and it's very interesting. The woofer in the EV has part number T911-6000-13360, and the tweeter T911-6000-11360, the exact same as the JBL. So clearly the same manufacturer made all 4 drivers, and it was likely a third party. This is more common than you'd think. For example, the drivers in Sonos speakers are made by a company called GGEC. But searching for these part numbers didn't really reveal much, except curiously that the tweeter brought up exactly 3 results, one of which is the product page for the EON. Another result was a listing for a tweeter from a company called Timpano Audio. I looked through its product catalog and couldn't find any matches, though of course it's possible they have unlisted OEM-only options too. Another manufacturer, Peerless, has a woofer that's very close in design, but it's rated for 8 ohms instead of the 4 that we know the drivers use from the amp's spec sheet. Some more digging got me the possible link I'd been hoping for. Not a product page, but a press release from GGEC that said they were a supplier for Bosch's communications business. And you know what pro audio company Bosch bought back in 2006? Electro-Voice. Now, I'm sure there are still enough differences between the EON and Everse to warrant the decent gap in their prices. The Everse 8 sells for a bit over $700 new, or about $600 used, while the EON One Compact is $550 new and around $400 used. What ultimately tipped the scales in favor of the JBL for me, though, was stumbling across one on eBay for $170 with tax and shipping. There was no description, and the photos didn't show the broken power button, so I knew I was taking a gamble. But it clearly paid off. This thing has definitely seen some use, probably as a glorified party speaker for a construction site, workshop, or some other harsh environment. I mean, the eBay photos were taken on the seat of a truck after all. But it still works great, and cost-wise, I ended up way ahead, even including the money spent on the replacement grill. So if you have one of these and the power button is broken, there's no excuse to leave it that way. The repair is simple, and the parts are free. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Here's another episode you should check out, and as always, thanks for watching.